Sons got married last August, and he and his wife now live in Naperville. But it's still Will County, Larry, so we're okay. All right. Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us here today. Now, I should probably begin by admitting that I love and respect R. Dale Evans as my brother. He is a true servant leader in the best, truest sense of that term, a leadership style to which I aspire and to which I believe Dr. Martin Luther King lived, as I will share with you today. Now, I consider R. Dale to be a friend and a role model, but he has really stacked the deck against me today. For the first community jazz brunch, he invited Vince Cornelius, a University of St. Francis alumnus and the president of the Illinois State Bar Association, to speak to us. And what a speech it was. For those of you who were there with me, you will attest that Vince has the soul of a preacher, and I'd never want to come up against him in a court of law. Vince hit a home run. Last year, for the second jazz brunch, R. Dale asked his sister, Dr. Tammy Range Alexander from Alabama Agricultural Mechanical University, to inspire us with her call to be first responders in the service of unity for Joliet and Will County. Tammy made that 2 home runs in a row. Now, after 2 home runs, I'm sincerely hoping that all of you, especially the Cubs and Sox fans here, and I know I'm on the south side, will tolerate a base hit in the 3rd year. Perhaps even a base on balls. As Kathy said, my name is Arvid Johnson, and it is my privilege to serve as the 9th president at the University of St. Francis and to speak with you here today. Now, I also have to admit up front to at least a small effort on my part to ensure that I have a friendly audience here today. Now, since I couldn't arrange for mimosas at the bar, I've decided to continue St. Francis' tradition of bringing a group of our students, hosted by my wife of the almost 29 years, Anne, to share this experience with you here today, and I'm always happy to have them here. I also brought my mom, Wanda. Now, I'm going to make her stand up again in a minute, but as R. Dale has noted in the past, our moms will always be our moms, and we need to do them proud. To that end, I'd like to recognize both my mom and R. Dale's mom and ask them to stand up so we can applaud them both for what they did to get us here. God bless. Now, I would also be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the attendance of 2 of my 3 sons, Will and Chris, as well as my daughter-in-law. I now finally got a girl, Mara, as well as several colleagues from the University of St. Francis. Thank you for your show of support. Today, I've decided to focus my remarks on a simple question that I would like to ask each and every one of you. Namely, do you desire to be great? Now, that's a loaded question if ever I've heard one, but I ask it sincerely. Do you aspire to be great? Now, before you all answer, at least out loud, and I will make you answer, let me share with you one of my favorite quotes from Dr. King. And fortunately, Kathy hasn't used this one yet. Everyone has the power for greatness, not for fame, but for greatness. Because greatness comes from service. Now, in light of that, let me ask you again, do you desire to be great? Yes. Thank you. If so, then Dr. King calls you to serve. It was on February 4th, 1968, exactly 2 months before he was taken to us, that Dr. King preached a sermon at Atlanta's Ebenezer Baptist Church that was known as the drum major instinct. In this sermon, he cautions us against the quest for recognition, this drum major instinct in which we want to be important, to surpass others, to achieve distinction, and to lead the parade. just as did Zebedee's sons, John and James, in Matthew chapter 20, or Mark chapter 10, as Dr. King referenced in that speech. Dr. King noted that this drum major instinct is not in and of itself inherently evil, but that it can become destructive unless it is harnessed. Harnessing this instinct requires following what Dr. King termed Jesus' new definition of greatness, as stated by him in verses 26 through 28 of Matthew 20. Anyone who wants to be great among you must be your servant, and anyone who wants to be first among you must be your slave, just as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. In one of the most beautiful parts of his sermon, Dr. King describes for us this new norm of greatness. And here I make an extended quote from his sermon. If you want to be important, wonderful. If you want to be recognized, wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. But recognize that he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. That's a new definition of greatness. This morning, the thing that I like about it is that by giving that definition of greatness, it means that everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You don't have to know about Plato and Aristotle to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's relativity to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics and physics, and I'm a physicist, to serve. And here's how he finishes. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love, and you can be that servant. End quote. Now, before I continue, I should note two things about my use of that quotation. First, I know that my reading didn't do it justice, so I'd encourage you to listen to one of the recordings of it available on the internet. Hearing that delivered in Dr. King's own voice and words is remarkable. And second, for those students present, Dr. King did not say that college is not necessary, just that it's not necessary to serve. And I'm going to come back to that, especially those of you at Washington Junior High. I'm coming back to that. At this point, I think I should check with you again. Do you desire to be great? Yes. Well, then Dr. King calls you to serve. Let's look at what Dr. King preached. And remember that his remarks are driven by Jesus' admonition that anyone who wants to become a great among you must be your servant, and anyone who wants to be first must be your slave. Now think about this for a minute. In the midst of one of the greatest, if not the greatest, civil rights struggle that our nation has ever faced, a nation that was only 100 years separated from its horrible legacy of slavery, in the midst of all this, Dr. King called upon his congregation, his followers, and each and every one of us to serve and to even be the slave of those we wish to lead. That's highly charged phrasing, if ever there was some. What was he thinking? I would argue that Dr. King was calling us all to a leadership style, a leadership philosophy that would not be formally named for another 2 years in a 1970 essay by Robert Greenleaf entitled The Servant as Leader, which coined the term servant leadership, inspired, as were Dr. King's remarks, by Jesus' words in Matthew 20. As Greenleaf explains it, the servant leader is servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. Then conscious choice encourages you to lead. That's sharply different from the one who is a leader first. The difference manifests itself in the care that a servant-first leader uses to make sure that other people's highest priority needs are met. The best test, although difficult to measure, is do those served grow as persons? Now, under this model, leadership is not about motivating people to achieve the impossible. It's not about inspiring greatness in others. It's not about building and maintaining a cohesive team, nor about creating organizational clarity. All those things are wonderful, and they've been the subject of many business books, but those are the means to the end, and not the end itself. Leadership is not about power and influence. It's about service. Leadership is not about you. It's about those you serve. Leadership is only authentic when it's servant leadership. So it's been a while so let me check. Do you still desire to be great? Yes. Well, then Dr. King calls you not only to serve, but through your service to lead. So let's explore this a little more closely. In one of the best books ever written on leadership, The Servant, a simple story about the true essence of leadership, a book that I give to and discuss with every member of my team, and which identifies Dr. King, along with Jesus, Gandhi, and Mother Teresa, as the quintessential examples of servant leaders. The book's author, James Hunter, argues that at its heart, leadership is love. Love in the Christian sense of love, or agape. Indeed, he offers the passage from 1 Corinthians that we often hear at weddings as the perfect definition of leadership, and I would argue service. And here I ask for your indulgence as I engage in a little poetic license. Leadership or service is patient. Leadership or service is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Leadership or service does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. I believe that Dr. King's core message on that day in February of 1968, his key insight, thanks to the way that he accepted Christ's message into his heart and lived it in every day of his life, is that true, authentic service is love. And that this is the agape love, the leadership, the greatness to which Jesus calls us. You see, through service, Dr. King calls upon us to recognize the good, the divine, the God that's present not only in ourselves, but in each and every one of us, because that recognition enables you to put others' needs before your own. This is a service based in joy and love, not obligation and servitude. In fact, as James Hunter notes, servant leaders must love those they aspire to lead, where love is the verb and means the act of extending yourself for others by identifying and meeting their legitimate needs and seeking their greatest good. Now, two key words in that definition are legitimate needs. Indeed, Hunter says that servant leadership is evidenced not by doing what those that you serve want and being their slaves, but by providing what they need for the long-term benefit of all. Said another way, and as Dr. King recognized, despite Jesus' own inflammatory words, service is not servitude. Putting it even more plainly, truly serving, truly loving someone is not about giving them what they want. Trust me, after 29 years of marriage, Ann understands this, okay? Although I give in. All right, truly serving. More often than not. Okay, truly serving. Truly loving someone is about helping them understand and get what they need. So how do you go about doing this as a servant leader? In part because of my background and experiences over the years, I found two key characteristics or essential traits that are necessary. Now, I remember them by the acronym of SMEE, or SME, as in Captain Hook's henchman in Peter Pan. I'm sorry, but my wife and I spent a lot of time at Disney. All right. Now, SMEE or SME stands for subject matter expertise and empathy. Now, subject matter expertise is an essential trait for any leader because you have to know what you're talking about in order to merit and earn credibly the trust that you need from others. This is especially the case when the path in which you're leading others is not one they may have chosen on their own, including when what they want is not what they need. But empathy is the essential trait that enables successful servant leadership, because it's through caring about those that you serve, that is authentically empathizing with them, understanding from where they come and how they feel, that you can identify their legitimate needs. It's empathy, especially when backstopped by subject matter expertise, that enables a servant leader to serve those they lead with credibility, even when those being led may prefer to be elsewhere. Now, for the students, especially our students from Washington Junior High in the room, I want to come, before I go any further and bring this all together, I want to return as promised to Dr. King's comment that you don't have to have a college degree to serve. He's right, but you do need to be educated in the sense that Dr. King described when he himself was a student at Morehouse College in 1947. Here's what he said about education, and again I quote, "We must remember that intelligence is not enough. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. Thus, the complete education gives one not only the power of concentration, but worthy objectives upon which to concentrate." End quote. Dr. King thus believes that a complete education involves not only subject matter expertise, but empathy. Now, at this point, if I were speaking to you about the University of St. Francis, I would point out that this is precisely the type of complete education that we provide, with challenging academic programs that prepare students to contribute to the world through service and leadership, inspired by our Catholic Franciscan values of respect, integrity, service, and compassion. But I'm not here to speak to you about the University of St. Francis, although maybe I just did. Instead, I just want to make sure that all of the young people here today understand how greatly Dr. King valued education. In fact, about a month before he delivered that drum major instinct sermon that I've drawn from so heavily today, he said the following, and again I quote, "I said to my children, I'm going to work and do everything that I can to see that you get a good education. I don't ever want you to forget that there are millions of God's children that will not and cannot get a good education. And I don't want you feeling that you are better than they are. For you will never be what you ought to be until they are what they ought to be." End quote. In other words, Dr. King felt that it's not only important for you to get an education, but for all of us to ensure that a high-quality education is available to every child. Now, returning to my drum major instinct sermon remarks and quoting Dr. King, recall that Dr. King's core message that day, his key insight, is that true, authentic service is love, and that this is the agape love, the leadership to which Jesus calls us. This is Jesus' new definition of greatness. So let me ask you again, do you desire to be great? Yes. Well, if so, Dr. King calls you to serve, and through that service, to lead. Now, near the end of this sermon on that day in February 1968, Dr. King reflected on his mortality and even his death and funeral. Now, in this closing section of my remarks, I'm going to move back and forth between Dr. King's own words and my commentary, because I think it's important for us to realize and appreciate how Dr. King so powerfully made his point that true, authentic service is love, and that this is what Jesus calls us to. Now, given Dr. King's eloquence, I'm confident you'll know when the words are his and not mine. He begins, "If any of you are around when I have to meet my day, I don't want a long funeral. And if you have to get somebody to deliver the eulogy, Tell them not to talk too long. And every now and then I wonder what I want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That's not important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards. That's not important. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. Now, it's important to note the first items that Dr. King would like mentioned. I'd like someone to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like someone to say that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. Notice how he equates service and love. And when Dr. King then gets specific on what this service and love means, he parallels Christ's message in Matthew chapter 25. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. And I want you to be able to say on that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. And I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. But then he returns to his core message. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. So I ask you one last time. Do you desire to be great? Yes. If so, then Dr. King calls all of us to serve, and through that service, all of us to lead. And that's the best thing about what we celebrate here today at this Unity Jazz Brunch. Not what we do or say here today, but what will take place across Will County on Monday, on our 10th day of service, or as our Dale likes to say, our day on, not our day off. This celebration of Dr. King's legacy has grown from 11 volunteers contributing 45 hours of service in 2006 to 659 volunteers contributing over 2,600 hours of service last year. That's you. You have all been called by Dr. King to serve. And through that service, you've all been called to lead. My prayer for you today is that you answer his call. May God bless each and every one of you. And in our Franciscan tradition, I wish you pace e bene, peace and all good things. Thank you.
Dr. Johnson, I think it's fair to say that you hit a home run today. Thank you. That was an awesome speech. That was very inspirational. And I think everybody has taken something from that, right? We all have an action item, and that action item is to serve, lead. You're not invisible. What you do counts. What you don't do matters. You have to serve. You have to lead. You have to carry the legacy. If you don't, who will? We all have a part in this. We have to do it. There's no exceptions. So one of the last things that I wanted to do was, thank everybody for coming. Thank you very much for participating. We all have something to do. Whether that's to come to events, whether that's to speak, whether that's to pay for something, whether that's to sit down with someone to help educate their minds, whether that's to hug somebody to help their spirit, we can all do something. And so I encourage everybody on Monday to do something to serve, something to lead. On behalf of my father, Dave Evans, who tirelessly worked the streets of Joliet, Illinois, every day, all of my life. I thank you. I thank you for coming. And I'll leave you with 3 quotes. The first, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, keep moving. The second, an individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. So it's not just about us, it's about all of us. And finally, nonviolence means avoiding not only external physical violence, but also internal violence of spirit. You not only refuse to shoot a man, but you refuse to hate him. Amen. All right. So with that, I'm going to bring up Ardell Evans to give us his closing remarks.
It has been quite a week, and it's been a great day. To get here at about 8:30, when the lot is empty and it's just you. Anybody ever throw a party and just hope people came? But today, everybody showed out and showed up in a big way. I'd like to give a special thank you to the quartet from Joliet Central High School and the ROTC from Joliet West. Give you a special thank you for getting out and coming up this morning. I'd like to also recognize our table sponsors. These events don't happen many times. It happens because you ask. And see, somebody here has got a vision, something that they'd like to see, make it happen. 4 years ago, I had that same vision, and today it's a reality. This is the third year that it's a reality. So I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to encourage you to follow the path that God gives you. Do that thing that he gave you in spite of those who will say you can't. In spite of those may send you down detours and say you're going the wrong way. In spite of them, know this, that it can be done with help. And I got a lot of help out there. I'm going to recognize them today. National Hookup of Black Women. Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to try to get y'all out here a little early, so if you hold your applause to the end, it might help, right? Just to make it one big one at the end for all these folks I'm going to do. How about that? The Fraternal Order of Police, yes, they are here. Joliet's Fraternal Order of Police, thank you for being here. Diane Harris, thank you so much for getting together a group of folks to buy a table today. The Housing Authority of Joliet, the administration and staff at the Housing Authority. Joliet Township High School 204. You brought some students too, didn't you? Why don't they stand up? We want to recognize the students that came from 204, that was selected to come from 204. I gave y'all a ruling that I just broke it. When we come to our young people, I'll break them every time to give them an opportunity to know that they can do more, be more, and have more. So ultimately, they can give more. Unity CDC, JCTV, you all, Mr. and Mrs. Schuster, they kick back their vacations so they can come and be here, and I appreciate you all again for coming out. We've got our local media, Times Weekly, WJOL, the Herald News. Thank you all so much for helping to promote the event. Also, the Jacob Henry Mansion staff and this event, and also I'd like to point you to look into your program book and look at those people who bought ads. Those are folks who've supported this program. One in particular, Empress Printing. I'll say this, that you ever need a printing job, at least give him a chance. And everybody else in that book, when you see them, thank them for supporting the brunch that we do every year. I'd like to thank Edna Brass. Edna?